Welcome to the CIO WaterCooler TV. My name's David Savage. I'm your host today. I'm also the founder and editor of a podcast called Tech Talks. On today's show, I'm being joined by Daniel. You are the head of product and innovation for RingCentral, correct?
That's right, yes.
Before we get into that, if you're new to the channel, this is basically an opportunity to share some of the peer insights from leaders across the industry, the kind of conversations that you might normally hear around a water cooler. So thanks for coming in and spending some time with us.
Extremely happy to be here.
Look, I'll be perfectly honest with you. RingCentral isn't a brand I was familiar with, but you're operating in a space where there are a number of large organizations. Kind of if you think about the likes of, I suppose, of Skype and Zoom, there's obviously Office 365 with all of their suite of products, then you've got Slack. Communications is a crowded marketplace.
Absolutely.
So how is the market from your point of view?
It's a really good point. It's a very crowded market, and I think especially so in the UK. When you look at pure telephony, there's something like over 90 separate providers in the UK. That's a crazy market, much bigger than other countries. So we're certainly finding that, like you're saying, it's crowded, and also that some of the companies in that very big stack are offering very similar things. So there's some aspects of communication which everybody has. So telephony for one, it's a very basic service. I think where the industry's sort of going is that a lot of these different providers are trying to differentiate themselves and find their niche. I will add actually that some of the companies you mentioned, they're actually smaller than us, and what we find is that, so for Slack and Zoom. But what we certainly find is we're primarily business to business, so
right. Our
focus isn't on consumer marketing. But it's a really good point, because those are great bits of technology and great at solving business problems. You'll also find that them in particular are great at finding their niche. So
I mean, what it does say is that the employer-employee model that has existed for 100 plus years is beginning to break down in different ways. The way that we view ourselves coming to work and having a career is materially different to the way that it was even 5 years ago, never mind 10, 25, 30 years ago. So what's driving that trend? Is it just that people are going, you know what, I don't want to be in an office Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. I have different pressures on my life that I want to be able to enjoy more family time? Or is it that organizations are being pressured in different ways and therefore are responding to a kind of an economic environment that's changing around them?
Yeah, really great point. And for what it's worth, we really agree with those trends. We probably see 2 or 3 key drivers. So one is employee sort of empowerment. So this is all about businesses trying to make their employees happier. So remote working, flexible hours, basically allowing them to shape the way they work to be more productive and happier within the business. And 2, we find cost savings are pretty big as well. So things like shrinking your physical presence down and allowing people to either work remotely to satisfy that, or work in smaller offices, closer offices. And the challenge we see is that the shape of work has changed as a consequence of both of those things. And communications and how we communicate needs to respond. If you're not able to be face-to-face with the team, if you're not able to share a bit of paper with them, have a chat, share a joke, that makes the working relationship harder. And a good communications product needs to be able to fix that. We sometimes use the phrase e-commuting as kind of working from home but still being part of a team, because you're really you'll be there in person.
I have to admit, I saw that written down earlier and I kind of thought, well, that doesn't make any sense. Surely you're commuting or you're not commuting.
Exactly. Yeah.
You make a point there about having a joke with colleagues. I find it really interesting when you start talking to tech startups who they might have their business-facing functions based in London, but they simply can't find the engineering staff in London. So they maybe have them in Eastern Europe or Russia or Southern Europe. And therefore you've got a completely international working culture who have different senses of humour. They might not even share the same language, certainly not as their first language anyway. So how do you replicate that office environment that, to be perfectly honest, I enjoy going into work for that social interaction? Yeah,
it's a great point. And to be clear, we're never trying to remove face-to-face. I mean, we're strong believers that communications are very important. That's why we build this kind of business.
Oh, but by the way, I don't think that you are trying to replace it. I just think it's it's an outcome, a natural outcome of what's
absolutely.
happening.
Yeah, I think it's about empowering people to communicate that they would the ways that they would anyway, and giving them technologies, tools, experiences that are able to effectively replicate as much of real life communication. So things like team messaging go a long way to do that. You can be part of a team. You can post things. You can post files. You can share jokes just by text format instead of being in person. And there's also little things. So one of the things we do, for example, is we integrate with Giphy. So being able to make that sort of casual water cooler style joke just makes that kind of interaction more natural. And of course, especially with international barriers, it's important to have those forums because the more you share, the smaller those differences become.
How does management, and I say that like it's some kind of slightly distant, slightly sinister style, but that typical idea of an enterprise management layer. How do they view we're adding Giphy to a work communication channel?
That's a really interesting point, and we hear this a lot from enterprises, especially maybe the more serious ones. And the biggest challenge we find is that people aren't alien to these sorts of technologies and experiences. You look at WhatsApp, Facebook Messenger. People have, these days, have an innate desire and knowledge of what they want online communication to look like because we've got some really good consumer tools. I always find it, a real challenge when businesses say, hey, we find this really alien because, a lot of us, and I'd have thought the majority of us have this innate understanding from consumer tech. So the real challenges I see from the business world are that not that they want the features, they want that function, they want people to be able to chat, but how to manage that in an enterprise environment. So being able to audit, being able to control, I don't want to say control the fun, that's perhaps the wrong phrase, but to be able to effectively monitor a work environment. And there's stuff that's deeper than just sharing jokes. There's things like bullying and harassment, real business challenges that need sensible auditing tools. So what RingCentral aim to provide is not only the tools to communicate and even have a bit of fun sometimes, but also the full set of business infrastructure to manage a business environment. I think that's a really important point that differentiates us from and serious business grade tools from consumers.
Well, like all of the tech sector, it appears that you're working in a part of the industry that's incredibly complex and quite clearly evolving quickly. So thank you for coming in and sharing some of those thoughts with us, Daniel. But if you enjoyed today's conversation, then please do subscribe to the channel for more insight and, of course, continue the conversation and comment below.